Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for taking a break from your very busy day to attend this very special event, a collaboration amongst the Daniel F. Cracchiolo Law Library, the Career Development Office, and the Student Bar Association. I'm Teresa Miguel Stearns, Associate Dean and Director of our fabulous Daniel F. Cracchiolo Law Library, and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to this book talk with our featured author, Spencer May, and interlocutor, Assistant Dean Leah Won. Spencer May is a first-year law student at our James E. Rogers College of Law. He now lives in Gilbert, Arizona with his wife and son, and on the way this summer. Spencer will practice in the Phoenix area after graduation this May. He wrote Memorable Law Students during his second and third year after College of Law professor and Vice Provost Tessa Dysart encouraged him to do so. Our interlocutor is Leah Won, our Assistant Dean for Career Development and Professor of Practice here at the James E. Rogers College of Law. Dean Won is a 2005 graduate of our College of Law and holds an undergraduate degree in public policy from Stanford University. After law school, Dean Won practiced in municipal and school law in the California Bay Area, working in 2 law firms, then serving as Deputy General Counsel for the San Francisco Unified School District. She joined the College of Law Career Development Office in 2013, focusing on the Phoenix market, and has held a number of roles over the years before stepping into her current leadership position in 2024. In this role, she focuses on postgraduate employment counseling and employer relations with both offices in Phoenix and Tucson. Prior to her legal career, Dean Won was a Teach for America Corps member, teaching first and second grades in Arbuckle Elementary School in San Jose, California. And so please join me in congratulating Spencer on publishing his book and welcoming him and on to this very special book talk today.
Thank you, everyone, who's being here. Thank you for that really lovely introduction, and it serves as an opportunity to spotlight one of our amazing class of 2026 graduates. We are so thrilled from the Career Development Office's perspective and from the library to be able to highlight his work. And in preparing for this session, I wanted to remind you, Spencer, where we first met. Okay. So it was I know, right. You had just started this with 1L. It was November 2023. And you were about 3 months into your 1L journey. And I had just returned to the Career Development Office in my role in an interim capacity. And our senior director at the time was Meredith Wiggins, who I hope is joining us online from her new law school. And she and I delivered a session that was part of our Preparing to Practice class, which is something all Arizona Law 1Ls take in the fall semester. And we actually delivered a session. We went back to look at the title. It was Skills, Networking Skills, Building Professional Relationships. So that's when we first met. I don't know if you remember, the session was a PowerPoint, and then after we closed, we went out to the courtyard and started to practice delivering our pitches and our personal value propositions with our classmates as a low stakes way to refine our brand and our values to the person under you. And from there, you went on to have a whole life as a law student and build this incredible experience with your in-person and online components. And your LinkedIn presence has really flourished as a result, and you've been able to reach so many people. Then you codified it in a book. And so that's what we're really excited to talk about more today. So it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to share this stage with you because of all of the work I can't even fathom as a law student to be doing that and then also like codifying that work in authorship. So that's amazing. Congrats. So we want this to be a very engaging session, and we welcome any questions as we're talking. I'll be looking to Dean Miguel Stearns to let me know if anything comes in through the chat for those of you online. But I thought we should start with a framework in our first question, and then if anything percolates as you are hearing us sort of describe this experience that Spencer has had with his law school journey and his connection to the community, we would love to be able to respond. Spencer. In Memorable Law Students, she described law students as the ostriches of the legal community, no, sorry, legal animal kingdom, with their heads in the sand regarding networking. Was there a specific moment that you remember in your time at Arizona Law here where you realized it was a systemic issue and not just a personal observation?
Sure. Well, first, thank you everybody for coming here and being a part of this journey. It's great to see so many friendly faces, a lot of professors I've had along the way, and members of the law school faculty and community. And thank you to Leah and her office and the law library and everyone who made this possible. Honing in on the question here, the distinct memory that I go back to is that first round of 1L OCIs, when a small subset of our class showed up in suits and the rest of us didn't. I remember that being like my wake up call where my head for the first time came out of the sand and I realized that there was something that I was missing out on or was honestly totally unaware. And so I remember seeing the dread on other people's faces, realizing, there was something that they were missing out on and thinking to myself that there was something else that I needed to do. There was some other, amount of opportunities or some other skill that I needed to unlock. During the law school process. And thankfully, throughout the journey, we had great inputs from your office and from others in the legal community and other professors that we had that helped us open up more of those opportunities. But that's the moment that I think back to is that first kind of like shock and awe of that 1L OCI cycle.
Yeah, gotcha. So sort of continuing along that theme, you mentioned there was a turning in your career when an associate that you had reached out to as a result of expanding your opportunities and connectivity, and you learned from this associate who was in practice that for the first time in 6 years, they heard from a law student, and you were surprised by that. And you thought that this could really help change your approach. So can you talk about that a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll paint a picture for everyone in the room. So it was February day, sitting at a coffee shop just off Congress Street with a 6-year associate at Snell and Wilmer. And the conversation ended up being more about what he didn't say versus what he did say. So as I kind of stepped outside myself and became like an onlooker in the conversation that I was living in, I realized, okay, this is an alumni in a law school who works at the most visible, accessible, and also like largest footprint law firm in the state of Arizona. And he's confiding in me that no law student has ever reached out to him. And so the conclusion that I came to is if no one ever reached out to him, then there were untold numbers of lawyers in much less visible or public-facing positions, also whose contact information is available online, right? Which is the dirty secret. If you go to look up any law firm, you can find the lawyer's either email or phone number. So thank you to the model rules of professional conduct for that. But that was the conclusion that I drew that if this person in this visible position had never been reached out to, then more likely than not, no one else is getting reached out to. And there were untold conversations to be had, opportunities to be made, commitments to be made at everywhere else in the legal community.
So you set up a framework in your book for the 4 W's. Can you walk us through the 4 W's? And one that I remember working with you on early was your deep commitment to Arizona, right? And what that looked like and how that unfolded in your process.
Sure. So the 4 W's, if we really take a step back, it's just a euphemism. It's an easy way to remember 4 things that are important: who, what, where, and why. And so I start with in the book talking about who am I and asking those really big questions, and move to what, which is what do I want to do? What kind of law do I think I want to practice? What kind of attorney do I want to be? And the next question is, as Leah hinted at, is the where question, which ends up coloring a lot of the opportunities that we either do or don't seek out. For me, that was entirely in Arizona. And the why question is a question I think that at least for me as a law student, I've continued to go back to. As you get different feedbacks, as you have different obstacles that come up, different challenges, that really what you fall back on is those concrete, big life questions that you hopefully have asked yourself, which I realized coming into law school, maybe I hadn't asked myself and I didn't have like a complete answer to all of those questions. So that's what I came up with, and it makes me think of a conversation that Professor Foley and I had before, before this talk offline that I'll share now, is we talked about the impetus for this book and the impetus for the framework, the content in here, and I like to now parrot a framework from Stephen King, where he talks about every book or every character or every piece of art he's ever written was a fossil that lived, and that his job was to uncover it. And so I feel like that's what I did with the 4Ws framework with the book Memorable Law Students, that this isn't some novel or earth-bending, world-changing framework that I came up with. It's a fossil that I uncovered. It's a truth that I was fortunate enough to put into words here.
Okay, so another component of your book is to discuss the distinction between advisors and advocators or advocates, and sort of the difference between the quality of that relationship and really how to convert someone and create for yourself an advocate, both internally and then externally with respect to hiring process. So could you talk a little bit about your experience with advisors and then how your experience with advocates helped launch your legal career as a law student and then following graduation?
Absolutely. I think it would be most helpful to start out with the definitions, at least that I assigned to these two words in the book. So an advisor is someone who's willing to advise, willing to give advice, willing to say what they've heard about an employer, what they've learned about a certain practice area, what they know about a subject. An advocate is someone who's willing to step outside themselves and make those actual introductions, connections, and take that next step for you. So the real first lesson that I took as I figured out what an advisor versus what an advocate does was the first conclusion that I came to is that you can't do everything, right? You can't get blood from a stone. There will be people in the legal profession, there will be people in any profession who are lawyers, especially, we love to talk, we love to give advice. But that not everyone is has the available time, has the available connections, has the available resources. Not everyone has made that either subconscious or conscious choice to be someone who advocates on behalf of others. And I had to be okay with that. And that makes it even more meaningful when you do find advisors. So the second conclusion that I came to is even though you can't do everything, you can do something. And so what I figured out is I had a much better time finding and developing relationships with people who would be advocates for me as I more clearly communicated what I now call my 4Ws, that when I told them who I was, what I wanted to do, where I wanted to do it, and why, that ultimately I was better able to help them help me. And the story that really crystallized it for me that Leah hinted at is an experience that I had at my last internship where I worked for about a year and a half at a place called Meritage Homes. It's an Arizona-based home builder. And my boss there was a College of Law alumni. And about 6 months into working for her, I learned just how much of an advocate she was willing to be for me, who at that time, I didn't have a job. I didn't have a place to go after graduation. And at that point, she decided to advocate for me. And so she sent out 29 introductory emails, which turned into 23 informational or formal interviews, and ultimately 3 job offers. So I learned very quickly just how different an experience you can have with someone who's willing to give advice, but then also then seeing just how powerful it is to have an advocate in your corner. And for me, that's made all the difference.
So along those lines, for our first-gen students who don't necessarily have an internal advocate in their corner to start with, or know and have deep relationships with lawyers or members of the legal community, how can they work towards building these relationships that are so fruitful?
Sure. The ugly truth is that you have to start at the beginning. that ultimately there's a certain amount of activation energy that I've come to find is required, that ultimately you have to start networking in the book, what I call the hard way, which is sending those cold emails, making those cold calls, asking for introductions from people at the law school or those in the legal community. And I had to learn this lesson for myself. What I share in the book is that my parents teach first and fourth grade elementary school in Central California. So I never met an attorney in Arizona. I can think of two attorneys that I had met growing up in California. So working and living in the Arizona legal community was just about the furthest thing from my reality. But as you continue to do that hard work, that like I shared in my past answer to this, you do that well and you communicate your 4Ws, you can begin to network the easy way, which is when you find your advocates and they do the heavy lifting and make those introductions for you. Because the reality is that there are certain doors that are not open that someone doesn't open for you. At least in the legal profession with our structured hiring process, with these ever earlier timelines, that sometimes someone has to open that door for you, often because you don't know that that door is there, right? So that was the conclusion that I came to.
Thank you. You have persevered when you sent 98 cold emails.
Probably understated.
With a very low response rate. How did you persevere? Like what guided you and your thinking through that process?
I'll start by saying that I'm glad to be now on the other side of that mountain. That it wasn't an enjoyable road while I was in it, and there was often this internal dialogue that I remember having with myself, a conversation maybe you can only have with your conscience, where I would consistently ask myself at a most basic level, like, am I crazy? And what I meant by that was, are my expectations not in line with reality? I had what I believed was a picture of what my legal practice would look like coming out of law school. And I had thought going into law school that I had reverse engineered and I had figured out exactly when things were going to go right for me. And I kind of predetermined how that was going to happen. And when it didn't, I was left scrambling and trying everything to figure out how to make that happen. A part of that was sending, yes, at least 98 unsolicited emails to attorneys. And that was really just me doing the work of networking the hard way. Eventually, through that process came a few advocates, like I mentioned, including the boss that made the introductions that ultimately made the difference for me. So as I look back on that period now, when I was having that dialogue, I really did fall back on the 4Ws, the answers that I had to those big questions. I knew that at the end of the day, I wanted to be a good husband and father. For my family, I wanted to be an attorney here in Arizona, and I knew that I wanted to do it, and I just had to hold fast to that answer. So as certain experiences or opportunities that I had predetermined for myself didn't come, there was maybe you can say an irrational belief in myself that ultimately ended up working out.
So, as I mentioned at the top, you've reached so many with your message via LinkedIn and via this book. If there's a current 1L who is lining up their summer opportunities right now, what would you want them to do the moment after they finish your book?
Sure. My invitation at the end of the book is to take 30 minutes for yourself, close the screens, have something to write with or write somewhere permanent, and really ask yourself what your answers to the 4Ws are. So that would be my advice to a 1L or to anyone just starting out in the legal profession is to ask yourself, who am I? What do I want to do? Where do I want to do it? And why? And what I've seen in the past 3 years is that as you have those answers to the big questions, that helps you to inform each subsequent decision. It also then becomes the substance of every conversation that you have with a legal professional. What I figured out by having enough of these awkward networking conversations with people who don't always want to talk to me is that every question or every answer that you give is some version, or really can be boiled down to who are you? What do you want to do? What do I do? Right? Where do we do it and why?
Okay, well, so our final formal question, and of course, we're open to others, is about how this professional identity that you've built will evolve over time. How do you predict that that will happen for your future, and how do you imagine law students currently should be thinking about that as they embark on their journey?
Sure, that's a $1 million question I'm trying to answer myself as well, is how do I go from being what I would term a memorable law student into now a memorable attorney? And as I reflected on it in preparation for this question, since I was giving these questions ahead of time, the thing that I've come to is that while the plays and players on the field are going to change, what I don't see changing are the answers to my 4 Ws, excluding maybe a change in a practice area, a change in a city within the greater Phoenix area. That those big questions have been answered. I know now who I am. I know what I want to do, where I want to practice, and I know why, and who I'm doing it for. Which are some of the names you probably see in faces on the screen behind you. Hopefully, there's a couple of Mays on the call. Hi, Mom. Hi, Sage. My wife. So my answer, at least in advance, is that the answers to the big questions won't change, but where I do it and what letterhead I'm doing it on may change. But then ultimately at my core, it'll be the same.
Well, it's really nice hearing from you, and I want to open to the floor. Oh, that's a question. Yes, sure, Kat.
So I guess my first question, 1L, you've identified what they should do. My question is, how do we get a 1L who is staring at doctrinal classes and reading and journal opportunities and extracurricular to even necessarily read your book, or to, even if they read it, to actually implement the 93, right? That talk about activation energy. How do you reach them, or how do you encourage them to find space or time? Like, where do they prioritize all of the different things that law school is asking of them to do this work you're talking about?
Sure. The unfortunate answer is that there is no time for it. Right? And most of us in this room have gone through the law school experience, that you understand that time is the most scarce resource. And the conclusion that I've come to is really that you just have to make time for it. One of the decisions that I made in writing this book is it's only about 56 pages. So I wanted to make it bite-sized and digestible for students who have told me that they've read it in one sitting. So that was an intentional choice that I made. And how I really stumbled upon, doing that initial outreach, what I call like the activation energy that's required to really get the networking ball rolling, was really like a combination of like FOMO from the interview process. Maybe you want to call it desperation. And ultimately it has to be a choice that an individual student makes for themselves. But, my absolute concrete belief is that it will make all the difference. And again, if I could wind the clock back, if I could have asked myself these 4 concrete questions, I think it would have informed the choices that I made as far as organizations or opportunities that I involve myself in throughout law school. So I hope that answers your question. But I go on this side. Do you have one from the?
Yeah, this is a related question. About 2 weeks ago, we had a faculty meeting, and a number of the members were concerned that many rising 1Ls were not getting much advice as to what they should be doing in their second or third year. A lot of talk about it. We haven't decided what the problem. How do we solve the problem? The question for you is, when you were, let's say, a 1L or a 2L, did you have faculty members that you could go to for advice and for advocacy? I mean, I read a lot of letters for students who are trying to find jobs, but nowhere near the number that I would have expected. So how did you handle that?
For me as a student, and many of my 1L and early law school professors are here today, so I hope that shows that there was some sort of rapport or relationship that was built. It did require that initiation on our end, just because necessarily there's 60 to 100 students in one class and there's only one professor. So I had to make that conscious effort to schedule office hours to do that outside research, even just looking up a professor's bio of things that they were interested in, what they did in practice, or things that they discussed in class. And just sparking those conversations during office hours. And hopefully, comporting yourself as someone worth recommending during the class time. And so I hope I've done that, as shown by the professors that are here today.
So basically, how do we get more 1Ls to do that? I mean, I think this is a relatively small faculty. We know a lot of our students, maybe not so much in big classes. And I suspect that most of my colleagues are more than willing to sit down during office hours with the students and say, well, these are some ideas you might think about for classes. And at some point, if somebody's looking for a job, say, can we help? How do we get more students to do that?
Sure, I don't know if I know the perfect answer to that, but what I do know is that, like you acknowledge, the members of the faculty are willing to have those conversations and have been more than open with me to their networks, to their vast experiences. So I don't have a perfect answer to that question about how to get students to be self-starters. Sorry. You want to start, Professor Dysart?
So I have lots of questions, but I'll try to narrow it down to 3. And one is kind of based on Cass's question. And I just want your family to know, you are so remarkable in just what you have done and the initiative you've shown since your first year. And I think the fact that you have so many faculty here really speaks to that. So kudos to your parents for doing a great job, and kudos to your wife for supporting you. So yeah, I think. So my first question for you, kind of going off of Cass's question, is do you schedule time to do, LinkedIn and things like that? Because I know that I always have great intentions and I'm gonna post on LinkedIn, and then it's the end of the day and I'm fought with my kids to go in bed. I'm I just need a glass of wine and read a book, So that's one of my questions. My second question is, someone recently, I was trying to remember who it was, I was talking to them about law professors. And they made a comment that a lot of law professors are introverts. And I was you know what? That is so true. Because to me, the thought of cold emailing 93 people is terrifying. So how did you identify those individuals? And how did you just have the guts to send the first one? And then my third question is, I have found in teaching now for a long time, when I have practitioners especially come and, do a moot court competition, for example, sometimes they give really terrible advice. And I have to find a way very politely afterwards, as Susie's laughing, to say to my students, we really appreciate so-and-so coming, but that's not the best advice. So how did you try to navigate the good advice and the not so good advice?
Sure. So your first question was about scheduling, right? I schedule things to a fault and live by basically a to-do list that Google gives for you, which is called Google Keep. My calendar was as color-coded as Google offers. And then I also live and die by my reminders on my smartphone, my iPhone that I use. So yes, I am scheduled and regimented. I would say my wife would probably say to a fault. But for me, those things that are important are things that get scheduled. And it adds another layer of accountability. That if I put it down in the calendar, get that reminder, then it's something that will get done. So that's what's worked for me and allowed me to miss less of the important things, or at least even just things that need to be done. Then remind me on your second question.
Second question, how you have the guts to message 93 people.
I think I hinted at it with Cass's question, is a combination of desperation, FOMO, anxiety. I'm sure there's better terms that you could attach to it.
And how did you identify that?
The first round with 98 unsolicited emails was absolutely done the hard way. It was who are a part of this subset of employers that I want to work at, and what people have their contact information there and work in certain practice areas of interest to me, and who do I think would be accessible. So for me, that worked out as, okay, I'm going to email the first 3 years worth of associates, because those are the people that are closest to me in age, experience, probably life as well. And probably can best remember what it's like to be a question or a lawsuit with a whole lot of questions and not very many answers. And then I figured that my time might be best spent emailing shareholders, equity partners who I assumed were the decision makers. So my outreach had really been bifurcated by the youngest and generally the oldest in a small subset of employers. But again, what I detail in the book is when I went and in retrospect did the math, my time wasn't very well spent. And I, again, at the risk of doing some lawyer math out loud, I want to say my response rate was less than 10%, through that cold outreach of just who I thought was the right people to talk to. And as I detailed earlier, that once somebody else was making those introductions and sparking those conversations, that the ball was rolling a lot further and a lot faster.
My last question is separating the good from bad advice.
Sure. I've heard a couple different analogies, and one that I liked was taking advice as perfume, that it's great to be smelled, but not always to be swallowed. And so, in my experience, no, not that I taste it's going to be a follow but really what I mean by that is that you take it in and you decide what does, if it doesn't either work for you, apply in your situation. And one thing that I tried to do was not to separate the advice giver from the advice, which may have been folly or an error on my end, but I tried to look at the station or the place in life that this person was in, how they treated me, how they were regarded by others, what I heard, and whether or not this was the kind of person that I would want to emulate in my life. So that it really did call for like value judgments, but I just had trusted my gut and what my intuition said. So one more from.
I have an online question. And this is for both Spencer and Leah Won. What sort of support from career development is most helpful for students using LinkedIn and other online networking tools?
I feel like I've done a lot of talking. Do you want to start?
Sure. My support. So I actually just saw posted to LinkedIn today an opportunity to attend one of the LinkedIn learning sessions that they hold, which has been regarded by, I think, some big employers as really valuable learning. I think U of A even has a partnership with LinkedIn Learning that the Human Resources Division allows our students and faculty to use. So I think expertise is best here. LinkedIn is, of course, a part of an algorithm. And like Professor Dysart, I always say I'm going to do better. And I really can be very well connected on LinkedIn, given the many students who have graduated through the school and who have connected with me. But one thing I notice is that you're building your brand from day one there. And so that is actually something that I was hoping to talk with Spencer about a bit. Of course, as a lawyer, discretion and judgment is so critical as you deliver your services and build your reputation in the legal community. And I'm learning, along with my 16-year-old and 14-year-old, how to build that presence in a thoughtful way. So what we do for our students at Arizona Law is we provide a resource in the Career Development Office Resource Library that is a LinkedIn guide for building your profile, but it's very bare bones. It's not interactive. It's here's where you go to get your headshot. The graduate school has a $25 fee for a professional headshot you can go take. And then here's how to build your introductory line. And that line doesn't always necessarily need to say law student or assistant dean for career development. It might actually be phrased towards the impact that you're hoping to make. I think mine actually says something like connecting Arizona law students with opportunities. So you might want to really consider how you're being portrayed in that way. And then is LinkedIn the place to go really nitty gritty, provide a bunch of detail like in your CV, or is it just sort of your roles and duration and major impact that you have provided? And everyone has a different guidance on this. I think it's really what resonates with you. And what I always advise students is to do exactly as Spencer has said, go look at a profile of someone who's doing the thing that you want to do and go back, right? And see where have they been, what roles have they contributed to, what were their major wins that they articulate in their LinkedIn profile, and see if that's something you want to try to emulate or do better. But I think Spencer is frankly the expert in the room here, so I'll now defer to his thoughts.
And I will say that Leah's office as the CDO have been really helpful throughout my entire law school experience. I know everyone's had a really great experience with our career services and career development office. And that all the tools that they have are definitely applicable to the degree that we as students, right, take the initiative and actually go and seek out and implement those resources. For me, a lot of the learning has been by doing. That the best advice and the best tips that I've seen a quicker or higher leverage ROI on have been by seeking out those that are professionals on LinkedIn. So what I've discovered is this whole subset of people who do LinkedIn as a service. And so they generally cater to certain industries or even certain practice types. So a network that I've gotten embedded with is a subset of LinkedIn ghostwriters or profile optimizers who are basically marketing experts for personal injury attorneys. So instead of having physical billboards, they, as a service for a living, make digital billboards, magnetic, sticky LinkedIn profiles. And so I've taken a lot of what they usually sell to their clients that they've given to me as free advice, since I'm not taking food off of anybody's plate. Professor Coe.
Thanks, Spencer. This is so interesting, and congratulations on the book. I remember you sitting just over there, possibly in this very room, maybe in the room next door. Frequently ask me about my plans for the weekend. I won't ask you about your plans for this meeting. The description of this event mentions you have garnered something like a million online impressions. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what those impressions consist of. Are they all on LinkedIn and other platforms you've been using? How did you do it? And how have you sought to leverage those impressions to pursue your personal objective?
Sure, yeah. And it was this room. I remember sitting right where Professor Rodriguez is. And probably, like you said, unsolicited, asking about your weekend plans. So thanks for bearing with me and for taking it easy on me. To tell the full story of how I came to see LinkedIn as an essential part of my professional identity is the summer before law school, I realized that a lot of professionals were on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn was social media in a suit. And I figured if I was going to be a lawyer, that I should be on the social media for people in suits. So what I did is I started reaching out to attorneys who were alumni of the law school, interviewing them, asking them what their experience has been in practice, things that they would and would not recommend. And I turned around and me and ChatGPT would summarize the conversation, and I would post a summary of those conversations. Ultimately, those posts were very boring. No one wanted to read them. And I didn't do a very good job of articulating the conversations that were had. But for me, I enjoyed the process of struggling initially at something that I thought was of value to my professional portfolio, identity, brand, whatever word you want to use for it, in the 2020s and this social media and this internet age that we live in. And so as I continue to be more active on the platform and interact with the same network and subset of the community that does LinkedIn as a service, that does it as a profession almost, that I learned what the experts were doing and replicated that on my own account. So yes, in the last 2 years, I've had about 4 million impressions, which is basically someone that looks at your post. That's 4 million impressions per year. And so for me, that the first thrust of that was a brand or name recognition effort, a visibility effort. And now it's transitioning into what I would call is building some sort of professional rapport with people. I'm starting to now get enough reach that when I go into rooms or have conversations with people of our age who are students at other law schools or early career associates, they'll recognize something that I've put out. So it's a way to build, I would say, to make friends without having to attend every happy hour downtown, and spark some early conversations, and maybe ultimately down the line it'll be an effort of some marketing that hopefully turns into business development. Though I don't have a product yet to sell myself, other than this book. So thank you.
Tell us about some of your highest impact posts.
Sure, I think the most meaningful impact from all of it, numbers aside, because those are really like at the end of the day, the vanity metrics. How many people scrolled on this? How many people liked it, commented on it? Like that doesn't matter. But you're only as good as your next post or the next number of people that engage with the post. The things that matter to me is that now consistently I have students that reach out to me and ask the same questions that I didn't know who to turn to. Even last night, I had someone that emailed me 9 p.m. asking for a recommendation on what LLM program they should enroll in, which I don't know anything about that, but I do know people who have done an LLM and have spoken highly of it or haven't spoken highly of it, and I was able to facilitate that introduction to another member of our class. So that's been the most meaningful thing to me, and I found that as I do a better job of offering concrete things like this book, I've also put together a free guide, like a how-to guide on building a LinkedIn profile. I've put together like what I call my case for law school. So I have these basically free Google Docs or online documents people can access. And those are ways to get conversations started. It gives them my contact information, and then we can go from there. Yeah, Professor Solomon.
I'm back. I only have a couple minutes, so I'll just ask my questions really quickly. First, your 4Ws. What do you recommend for the students who don't know their what? Yeah, a lot of 1Ls have. They want to be a lawyer. They don't know exactly what all the practice areas even are. And perhaps building on this question, and I haven't had a chance to read your book yet, so maybe you talk about this, but how do you, it became very clear from your description of your process that it's not a single email and payoff, right? And even the first 93 emails weren't what led to the job. It was what happened after that and after that and after that. How would you persuade law students that it's worth it, the persistence in moving forward in those incremental steps and being patient and, as you say, living in the struggle and enjoying the struggle as part of it?
Sure. So the what has to be the least important of the questions. And I would say that starting a new career without a concrete answer to your what may even be easier, because in any room or any conversation that you have, you can be interested in whatever that person does. For me, I felt particularly partial to transactional work. And I noticed that in conversation with people who litigate for a living, that oftentimes that ended up being a conversation ender for them. So for a student who doesn't know what they want to do, then the benefit to you is that you can talk about anything as if that's what you're interested in. And ultimately, we learn by doing. And so it's not until you're in those roles that you really figure out what does and doesn't suit either your personality, your skill set, even your desired lifestyle, right? So that's what I would answer to the first question. And then persuading people to continue and to persist in that is I would really just ask the question, do you plan to practice law? How long do you plan to be an attorney? And if you plan to be a lawyer for your entire career, then this is a necessary part of any career worth working, any career worth living. That ultimately the connections that you make, the people are what make it worth doing. That ultimately, when I look back now at my law school experience, I think a lot less about the oral argument that I gave at the end of our 1L class than I think, which was great, and thank you. But I think a lot more about the conversations that I had in office hours with professors, the relationships that I built with members of admin, faculty, and even just the relationships and the rapport that I have with classmates. Like the people are what lasts more so than the what or the substance of the work. So I hope that answers your questions.
That was a terrific ending point.
Yeah.